Hi, everybody. Last night on the trail, or I just had my last night on the trail, dropped into the 40s again, so it's getting kind of cool out here. Not too bad, though. I slept well. What I want to do here is just talk about the second saying that we live by here. The first one was embrace the suck, and I have plenty of videos on that because this particular trip was good for that. But the more important one is hike your own hike. And that means people are out here for different reasons, but they'll enjoy um, their hikes different ways. Maybe the number of miles they put on, the equipment that they use, whether they sleep in a shelter or in a tent, what food they eat, what cooking gear they have, that sort of thing. And an example of that is I ran into a guy named 7 Mile. This was years ago. And he got that name because he put on 7 miles a day. Now, for me, that's like, I'm not going to get anywhere at 7 miles a day, though there are days where I only put on 7 or 8 or 9. But in general, I'm doing a lot more. But that was his thing. I mean, he was an elder. I wouldn't say he was elderly, but he was an older guy, and that's what he could do. Most hikers out here do respect that. Not everybody's going to be through hiking. Not everybody's going to be doing long section hikes. Some people are just out here doing day hikes, and that's great. Do whatever it is that you enjoy the most. Now, an example of the exact opposite of that was Mike Conti and I had run into some through hikers here, north of here actually, the leg from between Stratton and Munson, and they were about 2,000 miles in, and they were kind of excited. But there was a younger one, maybe late teens, early 20s, and he insisted that nobody should be out here unless they were through hiking from Springer Mountain to Mount Katahdin, and that was the only thing that counted. You had no right to be out here if you weren't doing that. I mean, the fact that the through hiking didn't even exist for the first 40 years of the trail's existence, and section hiking was all there was, didn't matter to him. So I said to him, "Well, what about somebody who wants to go south to from north to south to be a southbounder because their schedule, work schedule or something, when they could get time off to do it?" He said they should quit their job. Nobody should be out here unless they're doing it this way. And he was actually serious. I couldn't believe it. I said, this kid's got no emotional maturity. I always encourage people, and people always encourage me for the most part out here. When I was down south, I did make a mistake on the hike your own hike thing. Doc and Professor, I was keeping up with them, and they were kind of surprised. They were young guys, and they knew that I wasn't putting on a lot of miles compared to them. So they encouraged me to go on to their next stop. You know, keep up with them. And I said, I don't think I can really put on that many miles. And they weren't being mean or anything. They're like, well, yeah, I think you can make it. You can make it. They were trying to be encouraging. And I didn't try keeping up with them, though I did try putting on enough miles to say, well, maybe I can show up late and still get there. And I decided part way through I couldn't, and I ended up stealth camping. And they actually came by because they had stopped to rest or get a resupply. And they saw my stealth camp, and they realized I wasn't going on. And the next day was the day that I twisted both my ankles, and it ended up. It wasn't until the day after that I finally got to the stop that they were going to, and that was my own mistake. I didn't hike my own hike completely. I fell into the trap of maybe ego getting in the way. Um, so now I'm going to talk about another another story that really it's a track story, but it tells you about letting people do their thing and not judging. It starts out as a hiking story. This the same group of through hikers. We finally reached the hostel at the end of our hike, and on the last day, Mike had asked me, can I put on 20 miles? And that fell within hike my own hike. It was a relatively flat stretch of trail, so I said sure. So we got to the hostel, and I was sitting there, and I said, "Oh man, Mike put me on a death march today." And one of the hikers says, "How far is a death march?" And I said, 20 miles. And Mike said, "You should have seen them laughing at you." And I said to him, I said, "Guys, I'm 58 years old at the time, so this was 5 years ago. And I just came out from behind a desk, and for 51 weeks, I'm going to be back behind that desk. Um, you know, I 20 miles is just not something I do. I said, could you do that on your first day? I mean, we've only been out here for a week. And, oh, yeah, we were doing 20 miles right at the beginning. And I'm like, no, they weren't. Nobody's doing 20 miles right at the beginning. You got to get your trail legs. So I told them this story. I used to, as most of you know, I ran track in high school and college. And after I graduated, I'd occasionally be asked to come in and come back to the school and officiate track meets. Not official school track meets, but summer meets. And there was one meet where it was a masters meet, and, which means age groups. And there was a guy there, and he was in the 35 to 40 age group, and he got like third place in the 100 meters, and his time was like only 14 seconds. And at the time, I was thinking, well, that's I could run a relay against a relay team of him and his three fastest friends, and I'd beat him in a quarter mile. I'm not stopping to think that you're over in your 30s and you're moving your legs fast enough to do still a sub 4 minute mile pace, which is what he was doing. I mean, he would have kept up for 100 meters with the 4 minute mile record holder. I mean, the mile, not the 4 minute mile, but the mile record holder, which is like 3:46 or something. I mean, the guy would have kept up. But I remember thinking, this guy must have been selected last in the school playground, on in recess and everything when it came to choosing sides for games. And he was just getting too excited for a third place finish in a rinky-dink meet. So he sees me and he walks over to me. And he says, "Hey, did you see that? I got third in 100 meters, And I'm like thinking all sorts of things. And I said to myself, like I'm an official, I can't say anything. So I said, "Hey, that's really great. Congratulations." And then he says, "Yeah, last year at this time, I could only take 6-inch steps at a time and walk with a cane. And the year before that, I was in an accident, and the doctors told me I'd never walk again." And boy, that really, drove home that you don't know anybody's story, and you can't judge their accomplishments. I mean, that guy, to me, had accomplished much more than anybody else on the track that day by getting third place in the 100 meters. And it's the same thing out here. There's a couple people I was hiking with. They didn't make it to this campsite, even though this was their intent. One guy's name was Phoenix Rising or Rising Phoenix, one or the other. And, he had a story where a few years ago he flatlined 3 times. I mean, he had a near-death experience. And, he had all sorts of heart problems. He had what he called a widowmaker. There's 2 things we call a widowmaker. One's the thing in your heart where, you can die instantly. And the other is trees that can fall on your tent. And that's the other widowmaker. But he was clearly out here and had to respect his limitations. But he felt he was getting healthier, and I thought that was fantastic. Another one was a woman named Tintpole. She was out here with her dog Beans, cute little Labrador, small. It couldn't have been a purebred because it was a smaller dog, but it was a lab of some kind. And she didn't get up here early either. And I just hope that the 2 of them ended up, there is a campsite about 2 or 3 miles south of here, but it's before these major climbs that I did. So hopefully, when they did their own hike, they hiked their own hike and are enjoying themselves. So I've got a 6-mile hike today just to get down to the road, get picked up, and hopefully get a shower at the hostel before I drive home. I do have a 400-foot climb today, but by the standards of this part of the trail, that's nothing. So signing off.